everybody for coming. Honestly, thank all of the people who are here, who are part of this conversation. I think you made the best decision of this summit. Recognizing that this is the most important design workshop. This is the most important conversation here at NESG. Talking about how to get more young people to be a part of the decision-making process, how to mainstream a more youth-focused, inclusive policies is so important, because if we get this right, for the majority, the largest demography of our country, then we're on the right path. So I'm so pleased that you made the decision to be a part of today's conversation. And I'm also very pleased that we have the #1 young person in the country who has made the best decision again of the conference to join this conversation this morning. And I'd like to invite her to deliver some opening remarks before we kick off today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Honorable Minister of Youth, Madam Jamila Mio.
Good morning, everyone. I'm indeed glad I made a good decision to be here this morning. Well, youth inclusion has become a global conversation beyond just a national conversation. And it is no wonder the NESG has deemed it right to have a session such as this year. For us, I will be speaking from the government perspective and what we're doing to ensure that government mainstreams youth inclusion in her policies. Well, we're also in the process of reviewing the National Youth Development Policy. And the first thing we did when we came on board was to ensure that the committee that was previously constituted to review the policy had more youth representation than it had before we came. Because, like we always say, decisions that are for us without us are not for us. So the policy review is putting into consideration the fact that the policy needs to be more expansive and thematic areas. We've added more thematic areas, even though the previous policy was very robust and very inclusive as well. But as situations evolve and realities change, we need to put those into consideration. The economic realities and the need for even more healthy young people. So yes, one of our thematic areas is youth well-being, because we realize that a lot of health challenges, from mental to sexual and reproductive health challenges young people are faced with. So, and this is also going to lead to the creation of a Department of Youth Wellbeing in the Ministry of Youth Development. And we've made much progress. We're waiting on the Office of the Head of Service for the final approval, because they have come and we've done our part and we're just waiting for them. So soon we will have a new department in addition to all the departments that we have. And also, I want to bring to our knowledge that the ministry is a new ministry, so we're in the process of laying foundation. The last 1 year has been more of a foundation laying process for us, because building a house without a solid foundation means that it will fall. Well, and that also explains why we haven't really been communicating effectively with young people. We hope that by the time the ground is solid, we will be able to show you a lot more of the things that we've been doing. And I also want to say that be rest assured that we have young people at the table making those decisions and making contributions to the work that we're doing. And the second thematic area would be climate action. The previous policy didn't really lay a lot of emphasis on climate action. So we're very intentional about climate action, and we also want to create a Department of Environmental Sustainability or Climate Action. And coincidentally, in the process of preparing to establish that department as well, we also realized that the act that established the Climate Change Commission of Nigeria, the NCCC, requires that every ministry should have a Department of Climate Action. So then another area we're looking at is leadership, because we need to have more young people at decision-making tables to ensure that the intergenerational conversations happen between the older generation and the younger generation, to ensure that we put young people in the positions where they can learn and take the reins of leadership in the near future and ensure that our country is in safe hands. The Federal Executive Council in March, late March, approved the inclusion of 30% minimum of young people at decision-making tables. That's in government appointments from the federal, the state, and the local government tiers of government. So this is a policy that we're also aspiring to push to a very a highly implemented conclusion. And we will be needing your help to be able to achieve that. In addition to the youth quota, oh yes, and there's also an equitable young women inclusion, because being a young woman, in this space, I realized that a lot of other young girls or young women are struggling to have their voices heard, and it's a privilege for me to be here in this position, and I thought that I should lend my voice and also take action to ensure that we bring more young women to decision-making tables. So yes, 15% each. And let's not forget that the women also have the 35% affirmative action. So that will give us some equity with time, hopefully. And well, there's no inclusion in leadership, in policies, without inclusion in the financial economy, without financial inclusion for young people. So yes, we're all used to, when we talk about youth, we only think about young people going for being out there and, in the crowd, and you scream, build the youth, they say build the nation. So we want to have a shift for young Nigerians. We want to have that shift, a mindset shift, to ensure that they contribute more to society than they actually do, because, we need to create opportunities to ensure that their potentials are harnessed, to make great impact and to be active contributors to Nigeria's socio-economic development. So we're trying to change the narrative and reposition young Nigerians to be more active participants in the economy, and hence the restructuring of the Youth Investment Fund and the establishment of the Presidential Initiative on Youth Enterprise Clusters, where we create enabling environments for young people in various sectors, such as the blue economy, the creative economy, the digital economy space, the green economy space, and of course the extractive industry. Just to name some of the sectors that we're focusing on, because these are high impact sectors. And of course, we know that the President, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is committed to building $1 trillion economy for Nigeria. But how do we build $1 trillion economy if we do not create opportunities for the largest demography of the economy? So I thank you very much, and I thank you for inviting me as well. I hope that we have a very interesting deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Bill. I'm very pleased again to have you here, and I hope that you'll be staying for the majority of the conversation. I'm very delighted to hear that the ministry is currently in the process of reviewing the National Youth Policy. And I think that's why it's important to be in a conversation like this, because this design workshop is going to not just be focused on what we must do to ensure a more youth-inclusive framework, but how are we going to do that? So it's really important to, for everyone who's here to know that today is about the how. We know the many problems that are facing young people in Nigeria. Today is not about the problems. And I can read you all the statistics, right? But what's important to know is that this is the most important demography in Nigeria, the largest for that matter. At least 74% of the population of this country are made up of young people or people under the age of 35. That's huge. Meanwhile, this same demography are the most underrepresented across governance, across education, across all sectors, right? But I think it's also important to, when we think about the youth population, to know that this is not a monolithic group, right? When you think of the youth population, you have women, girls, right? And we have young people living with disabilities. And these issues, they are all facing it in their own ways. They're just very different variations of underrepresentation that are going on. So when we think about putting on a youth-focused lens, we must not forget the different dynamics of young people, right? So 62% of girls and young people or youth, right, are the ones who are out of school. When you talk about the out of school population, 62% of them are women, right? When you talk about access to education for persons living with disability, 95% of children with disabilities in Nigeria have no access to education. No access to education. This is a 30 million plus population of this country. They are part of us. They are also part of Nigeria. So I'm not doing the talking today. What's exciting is that we're all doing the talking. So I think I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel members, the moderators of the different work studios. We have 3 work studios today. And I'm so pleased because the summit could not have picked a more dynamic, competent, they picked the perfect people to lead these work study groups. These are studios. These are individuals who are in the moment. They are doing the work. They understand the issues. And they're really going to guide this conversation in a way that, again, we're walking out of here with action. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, during the Independence Day address, mentioned that he is going to be, launching a youth confab. What does that mean, right? The conversations we're going to have here today will help President Tinubu to frame that conversation, that engagement in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is impactful, in the way that it delivers the best results for young people. That's why this conversation is important. All of what we have discussed today is going to be, compiled together in a green book that will be spread across not just the Ministry of Youth, but across all the different ministries, because youth issues are intersectional. It doesn't just lie within the Ministry of Youth. Every ministry actually has responsibility for ensuring that their policies are youth focused. So that's why today's conversation is important. Now, show of hands. How many of you agree that this is the most important design workshop at the NES Summit? I don't have all the hands up yet. No problem, that's not a problem. By the end of the day, I'll ask this question again. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome the 3 moderators for our work studios. The first work studio, Establishing Youth Inclusive Policy Guideline, is going to be asking the question, what should youth inclusive policy look like? And that conversation is going to be facilitated by no other than Chinenye Owanaka, the founder, Firmer Advisory and Africa Policy Conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Ms. Owanaka, who's going to be leading this session. The second work studio, Creating Mechanisms for Youth Engagement and Participation, is going to be asking the question, how can we effectively engage young people in not just the implementation, but also in the design phase of public and private sector policies? And to lead us in this conversation, we have none other than Chimdi Neleako, Special Advisor to the Honorable Speaker on Interparliamentary and Public Relations. And the third work studio, what is all of this without thinking about monitoring and evaluation frameworks for some of these inclusive policies? So this session is going to be looking at how do we know when we're making progress? What does progress look like? And to lead this session, we have my big brother, my friend from many, many, many years ago, Mr. Rotimi Olawale, Executive Director of Youth Hub Africa. So you see, 3 dynamic young people. And I think at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and pass the mic on to them and say we're split up across tables. I've mentioned the 3 groups. The first work studio is led by Ms. Owanaka, the second one by Ms. Neliako, and then Mr. Olawale. So maybe I'll ask the group leads to just go and, sit by a table, and then for the individuals in the group, let's try to equitably distribute ourselves to make sure that we have as many voices as possible, as part of this conversation. One of the last things I'll leave you with is over the last week, I had a radio interview with a good friend of mine, and we're talking about the International Day of the Girl. And she said, Bella, a lot of people, they praise me and, call me the voice of the voiceless. They say, Priscilla, you're the voice of the voiceless. And she said, I don't want to be the voice for the voiceless. I want the voiceless to have their voices, right? So this conversation, that's what this conversation is about. We're not here even representing young people. We're designing a framework for making sure that young people can have their voice across different sectors, right? So I'm now passing on the conversation to the moderators. You have 50 minutes, very limited targeted time in each work study. 50 minutes to delve in. We're going to come back in the bigger group. Each group will get 5 minutes to debrief, and then we take 15 minutes to have a back and forth if you want to share ideas on what other people have done, and then we wrap up. It's very straightforward, very targeted. Thank you. So for those who are in the work studio 1, let's try to gravitate towards this table. We really want your voice to be included in the conversation. So as much as possible, physically move yourself to that table. So the first topic, this is Work Studio 1. Work Studio 1 is Establishing Youth Inclusive Policy Guideline. Work Studio 2, which is on my right, is Creating Mechanisms for Youth Engagement and Participation. So this is the how. And this is the Monitoring and Evaluation Framework, Work Studio on my left. So let's form this group over here into a C. Let's get into like a C so that we can all see each other. And so each group, if I can just add, just try to identify a scribe, somebody who will be taking notes on behalf of the group. And this is the last time you're going to hear my voice, other than reminding us of the time that we have. So we're 5 minutes into our 50 minutes.
My name is Binta Mustafa. I'm the founder of Under the Moon Tech Nigeria. I'm very interested in how we evaluate some of this valuable initiatives that we implement every time.
Now we'll go to the first one.
Hi everyone, my name is Blossom Ozurba. On the corporate side, I work as the social media coordinator within the city, and then on the subsector side, I do some of the work with other communications companies in my country. My name is I'm a lawyer. I'm also
Okay, so essentially what Africa seeks to answer the question of how can we effectively engage in both design and implementation of
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Abelani. I am the facilitator for Community of Practice on Youth at the NSC.
I think our watch today is very
Well, that's get the conversation running. I think it's important we sort of look at spaces, right? So, one we have had in the past is the not so and one very deliberate number of minutes that had then gone into which I believe you were part of the team that championed. So we have a lot of young people whose lecture especially across the states and regions.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're a rapporteur, can you just raise your hand, please, so that we know where you are? I know Joy is here. Where's our second rapporteur?
So that be more like president, number of people benefited.
Even executive, because I think the state government is the number 25% of the fails is
I think that's a very excellent case study. But the right way of doing it is always to engage the youth, the young people themselves. And that's what we're trying to do here. I think that, the same points for young people. These are what can really send people. We're not like take the position of young people, like showing that voice. We want to give the voice to young people, and that's what we're trying to do.
So in terms of that
So this here was
life is
the first question is what's the criteria
what is the age class to 18 to 35?
According to the last policy,
Brown.
It's interesting. 15 to 29 and then working in diverse sectors with different partners and different entities behind that. Depending on the partner working for, you know, so that you adjust your brackets.
It will be okay. Hold that way and look at it. And you can take it down now.
The way that academics are defined, you would children, so you have space where you transition. And probably that is the transition in Africa compared to Europe, where how do you transition? And at what age are you able to do that successfully? So people are arguing in many African countries that people are finishing university, they don't have a job, people are staying in their father's houses, able to rely on family and friends to support themselves. So that is a transition. They still need a lot of support and limitations are getting there. And so there's a lot of argument whether 29 is that age, whether 35 is that age. Some people will say 40 or 50. But why I support the lower age is also scope. That was participation. The higher you raise it, the more people higher bracket will see the more participation. They say 45 now, the 40 to 45 people get up on the position and the we have to be careful in the way that striking the balance.
What do I mean by sharp members? We must be that will learn the methodology of what to do. I'm giving you the model for my own business. So if you go to a particular community to implement a project, so it's a sharp project. I love that point. I think sharp communications facility.
It reminded me of recently the speaker of the House of Representatives stood on another meeting here with the last year. That was kind of nice. That was yeah, so go ahead. And you introduced the right to
So,
so I like the fact you mentioned data because currently so I'm happy that the person that mentioned that and it's a critical thing right now. And the same thing was so we have the NBS, but the data there is not capturing the wage. Currently working with the World Bank to create a product. I can't say the name, but I'm not allowed to say the name. Registration of the product, right? So what you're saying is very important, and I look forward to discussing it with you. Now you said this, I look forward to see how we can collaborate. Because we're big on collaboration. That's the only way we can also do it. We did that back then, we solve every problem that we have. Program
within your community for this crowd, so you already have something from there.
So there are behind the scenes programs going on that are not supposed to be online. That's why we're excited because I need people to come up to address
I encourage 100%.
So I just stood up to say to put an exclamation mark on data because it's extremely important. I'm also working on that to help collaborate.
Thank you very much. Okay, my name is also touched on the next question now because I think that's really that's really around I'm here for the knowledge advice and transmission. We have advice so you have two people that want to respond to some of that question. Not give them around. You have to have one like so many important things.
Good morning, everyone. My name is very fantastic initiative that I just had a concern initially I thought that this was that we didn't have the unity for capping to 29 because I think one problem we have in Nigeria is that we have every agency, every entity has their own. We have NIS, we have you're doing your INEC, you want CBT, you go to OCT, you have your own data back. It's just fragmented. The example she used in Tanzania sounds like a central repository where even medical data can get to the demographic can get to it. So if the ministry could extend the collaboration in the same field to make it all inclusive, so that because if someone wants to get data of farmers, you should have a central bank and that became fine.
Ongoing policy that look at the children, and I think that was the biggest debate when that policy was being designed. Also having been involved in this policy for many years, but if you look at the specialist administration, where that's where many participate in processes and activities and all, then the higher the age, the more address focuses on the older youth, and then they neglect the younger ones. That's of even training them for leadership opportunities. Investing in them, so for instance, say compared to national income state, if you are 15 years old and you are compared to somebody who is 35, you don't have the social capital and network to compete, and all of those kinds of things. So that's one of the major arguments. I mean, it's neither here nor there.
But I think it also
there's a point that
we're not just we also seeing that kind of model
people that being measuring the number of youth that take part in the policy design process itself. I think one of the failures I have involve more of educated young people on the table. I don't see enough work being done. I mean, not that much energy, right? Many of us in this room have a lot of privileges, and that's why we're located here. How do we bring other young people who don't have the privilege to see experience here, but also have pinpoints that perhaps are not being captured in this policy? I think that's also something of importance. You wanted to say something?
I was going to say that the issue of age, right? I think that two aspects to look at it. There's about measuring youth productivity in Nigeria, and then comparing it to youth in the global stage are achieving a lot more productivity and competitiveness a lot earlier than Nigerian youth. So when you're now having Nigerians push all the way to 35 as a youth, when you go to countries in Europe and the US, you have 21-year-olds achieving what 35-year-olds in Nigeria are. I think we're disenfranchising ourselves by pushing that group too far out. We need to bring it in, and we need to have smaller segments to make us competitive both in Nigeria and globally.
I also think there's a cultural aspect where the 15-year-old sits in a room with adults, they treat him like a kid. I mean, I started very young in this process. I started with professors, and they want me to serve them tea, and I refuse it. And they say I'm rude, like, why are you very rude? So there's also that cultural aspect where there's a thin line, and it's part of the things that we have to.
It's part of the thing that policy needs to deal with. But also, when you think about a 15-year-old in Nigeria versus a 50-year-old in Europe, a 50-year-old in Nigeria has seen a lot more life, and it's a lot more mature in terms of they can function in an adult world because they've had to struggle in a way that a 50-year-old in Europe. So we can make that an advantage for us to say that rather than youth in Nigeria being delayed, we actually can arrive earlier than youth in the rest of the world. Use our struggle as a policy to develop us. So maybe we should start now.
She raised that hand, but I didn't want
and I think now what we might want to do is then so what specific data that
in terms of
help us access youth data?
The younger youth who experience not use
so maybe because we can store data, I think let's take data action to be more specific.
delivery policy in terms of... So let's go to the next question. What, okay, this is how can we integrate these guidelines into the existing policy across different sectors? And let me ask the last question together with my presentation. What best practices in terms of now, that's great. But what I want to add to that question, personally, is what best practices so what has worked
started as weekly also started. I think there was 9 of them started as local government chairman. But today, some people don't see that. They see, I want to be senator, we run for office, and they don't see that they are actually part of the local government, and we need to show more of that.
Let's think through those two questions and as we're sharing our answers, like I'm very do you think Nigeria are not like us? Realize that
actually
you know what I mean?
Just an example.
So I wanted to just add one more thing. It's age, it's disability, it's gender, it's socioeconomic status, it's location, making sure that we have indicators that are representing of those subsets. Educational outcomes, employability rates are always increasing as a result of those policies.
I'm happy with flat location. I was on the committee on the first application, 70% of application came from Lagos. And there was a huge debate on should we mark by merit. And we reached the chance of mark by merit. The majority of the winners will come from Lagos, and there will be a national uproar. And eventually, what the minister decided that the first 300 winners will be by merit. And then there will be 200 winners that will emerge from each of the 16 political zones. And I think that was more a very good balance. I remember the meeting took hours at the Ministry of Finance to have a model on how to do it. And we need those kind of things in Nigeria because of also inclusivity. And it's part of the things we mentioned, education, educational outcomes,
Piggybacking on what the board said, in a lot of ways, it's almost on what everyone said. In a lot of ways, it's easier for young people within such regions, metropolitan, cosmopolitan, built up urban areas to access opportunities. Not easy, but easier relative to their counterparts. And you think of what do you need to do, what do you need to make available to those that are in other regions. So for example, we do know that young people in Nigeria, we might not say that they're entrepreneurial, but they're hustlers right from a young age. You find them in some form of work, usually informal. So how can we make those kind of settings, such as the informal settings for young people in younger kind of youth in those regions? How do we make contextually relevant opportunities for them to build acumen, thinking, leadership, entrepreneurship, so that as they move on, it not only affects them positively for their livelihood, but also in terms of them competing with others from other regions. Because the reality is, the informal sector, for example, has over 70% of what constitutes the labor force. Most of regions are not built up as well, so you need to cater in a more inclusive way. You need to cater to them in contextually relevant and not work. At this table, just as she said, this is not, we believe, reflects the reality. We need to educate them as well.
I see a hand behind you. Are you raising your hand to look like that?
It's something that we're very clear on. It's a measure and evaluate because that's the starting point. We need to define what is it about youth programs for Nigeria that we want to measure. So I think the first place to start is the Ministry of Youth, and then see the cross sections, Ministry of Education, Gender, Environment, and all those other cross-cutting. What is it we want to do as the ministries, as the department, for young that's the way to get it on. Otherwise, we're going to be measuring the wrong metrics. So if we do not go through that investing those entities, we're going to be measuring and evaluating the wrong things. They have a memory, a repository, all this
I just speak about that. One of my good friends started a movement called Follow the Money. So it's money to track and how we invested, right? A lot of people say you should do it because how they can speak for the Ministry of Youth, but I understand their budget is not needed. If you take out funding for NYC out of the Ministry of Youth, are practically nothing there. So I think some years, the NYC budget is like using the Ministry of Youth budget. And so a lot of people blame the Ministry of Youth for not doing anything. You have 60% to left when you remove NYC and there's very little segment of the young people. That's just a segment of the young people. So we have to track investment, how much is being committed to you. So they'll come to you.
Okay, all right, thanks so much. I like as you brought up the education part, so I think one thing we can consider, especially for education, I know one of the major thrusts of national youth policy, the old one and the new proposed so we can
was here before, that's why she's so wise, or he's so wise. And I think we need to start incorporating that type of thinking
in the private sector
into the
sort of
for and about.
I know the Lao Trust had a CBN. It's right by CBN.
So you have children that
has some
so I think that's the separation.
So what now national policy providing single loans for education. So that's one thing. So now, the easiest way to measure this, I don't know how gender test came about. You might know, but I know in almost all the MPs, there is what they call the gender test. So when we have those tests in all the MPs and of course private sector, so they have things like serving on the desk, they have things like gender test. So what about having a gender test? So that way they can be able to track the youth-focused initiatives which most organizations put under their CSR because it's best known to them. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of disparate interventions going on across board that is not tracked. And at the end of the day, the youth ministry could say, oh, we've been able to do so, but they've actually done a lot more. The challenge is that we were not able to sort of track mainstream and then have a policy that sort of looks at everything with the plan to then, own it and if possible, so that provide that kind of rallying power that will sort of support decision making. So people, they don't just do CSR for the sake of CSR, but we're doing CSR because at this point the focus is on education, the focus is on probably skill development, but there's and then we're able to measure that and track it holistically. So that could be a solution.
Just a very brief point of clarification. I really want to emphasize that when it comes to higher ed, when we're looking at national education, the context of
So why are we doing that important? It's not saying that this is nice to have. This is an actual incentive that we're going to be because we want to go by community. And to be very honest with you, most of the it's about a tax incentive. Not only are they nice people, but they also there's something that they can gain. So this is something policy is just a very easy thing to incentivize people to keep. Well, you know, obviously, Shell and most of the ISS have this bad reputation about most communities and things like that. A lot of young people there, the environment is an issue. It's something I feel like the ISS can also champion as well. Because it just shows that, like, I know you guys are doing already playgrounds and initiatives and all that stuff, but because when you look at the country in Nigeria, all of this like our mainstay and it's one of the pinpoints where people feel like that we have this resource we didn't develop, we need to actualize using it. And maybe, I don't know if it's too late, I don't know if it's too late now, I know a lot of like, people are divesting now and all that stuff. It might be worth, you know, and then there's some of the things, like, I remember when I realized that technology when I read what that fund was for, I was shocked out. If that fund was actually implementing what it was supposed to be, this issue of now refining what it was supposed to be, because we would have been investing in technology. The know-how here.
I can't very strange because it's like every policy and every sector naturally has, I mean, it's like education is all about. It's not a case of education is going to start when it starts when you're 2. So why do you do? I think it's the way we frame discussion as though you're doing things by including when they are a natural part of everything. So education starts from you develops the university, health starts from here later for the rest of your life. So the way we discuss it, you know, it's almost like the way we discuss disability. We have a separate policy for disabled people because we cannot operate disabled people. That's the way we discuss it, as though we are a disabled demographic that needs to be brought into the rest of the population. And I think that is the wrong way of doing it. Ministry of Youth does not need to be told that youth is part of their one. Health doesn't need to be told that youth is part of their one. Labor doesn't need to be told. I think Ministry of Youth is a coordinating ministry that is monitoring how other sectors' policies are being implemented rather than coming up with policies on their own. Because it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense to me.
But I think from a practice point of view, if you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, for instance, and you propose a youth project, they will tell you, oh, this is the Ministry of Youth, right? Occasionally you see a youth in agriculture project, and if you measure it by this budget allocated to them and what they are allocated to you, you see it's very small. I'm just telling you from
when is the budget allocated to them? Who is them?
To Ministry of Agriculture, for instance. I'm telling you about practice, what is currently being practiced. If you go to Ministry of Agriculture and you track their budget, you will see 1 or 2 youth in agriculture projects. And then the rest is, if young people go there, they tell you, no, go to Ministry of Youth, this is the youth in agriculture project, and then you see that this is allocated to institutional farmers cooperative, where a lot of adults are already entrenched in these kinds of.
But to me, that is normal market dynamics. If you should not be going to agriculture for, you should be going to the bank. You should not be going to the ministry for home. And this, but this is my point. We need to correct the system. We cannot quality. No, to me, this is making use out of that we need to support them rather than allowing them to flourish. This is a deliberate policy where you are continually, it's like the whole giving them fish rather than teaching them how to fish. Continuously treating them as they are a handicapped segment of society. So that's where we, rather than actually enabling them to go on their own.
In the legal profession, what happens is that in Nigeria, we do not have, when we think about everything seems every situation where the budget is more often worldwide priorities are, even if you look at one system like education, how much is being invested in higher education, using the investment in agriculture. So all of these, one of the things I wanted to ask, not to take us too long, is investment in infrastructure as a someone just brought to my attention that electricity has been in abundance for 150 years. And now we're talking about the Industrial Revolution and
the Ministry of Youth can create a forum.
I mean, looks every day. So we have a lot of control. So this is just year one and 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I don't know if you can find out also how we should
The program, where you then
I just wanted to add that such you said years of neglect, and so we are engaging in that advantage because of the years of neglect. But what you said is one of the reasons why I don't.
but what you find is that if you start with 1,000
Can happen without
and you get 5, that's what mentorship is. But somewhere that really changes the national discourse.
Recognized as
That's
national
comfort.
but moving it forward, such that government is at the highest level, the ministry is engaging with your agents. How your actions so the ministry needs that stuff. Yes, it's there, but
So I don't, trust me, whatever Mr. knows that I'm breaking this down. I don't like
this budget is giving
like I've attended I went to the University of Lagos in like,
you as the
so I've attended talks. There's a lot of action that now you're saying this about the
there is specific data that they are putting on
let's
ministry.
start
Then you now go when you are working for the policy
I don't have
and show them the data.
action
In terms of education, this is where you're pulling down, where you want to target. In terms of health, see that the division in this part of the country, this part of the country is the age. So you as the ministry of data, and you are gathering from all sectors of the economy. But not that, they are now having to say, you're going to this table, how do you do
I think the next question is straightforward. It's about how can we ensure transparency and accountability in the implementation of youth inclusive policy. Transparency and accountability in the implementation of youth inclusive policy.
And the union is to create they should create a database and have all the data sets that they need from every sector. And whether it's once a month, once a quarter, they need to be going to these agencies and say, give us this data. And they become the repository for this data, and based on this data is when they have policies to be
And just from experience to say that there's a lot of data that already exists. From my experience, we have a lot of non-political movement that want to avoid it. So when you present data and say this is where you get this somebody is saying this is my constituency, you have to be my constituency. And then it's very difficult from the civil service to organize it, not from the civil service to correct that.
And no, but I'm not
just in the youth sector, I think it's all
yeah, but it doesn't also have to just and it's still very then so you're not that
because first of all, you know that if there would be a way to exercise it, the first question is, what are you holding someone accountable for? You don't know what's happening. What are you holding someone accountable for? As she mentioned, that platform can be open source, and everyone has access to it. And then the people that have access to it, we know that the civil space is that everybody aims to hold the sector but then beyond accessibility in our society, the normal everyday what do I know about accountability? Do I know that there's freedom of information act that says that give me the opportunity to just circulate and say the enforcement is do I know that if this can go and all that. And then it was also the one. I think that's
So maybe that I know the problem with this.
You don't respond when
oh yeah, I've submitted that. No, so I've also gotten a threat listed because of that or something.
that's what I'm talking about. But they don't respond when job description. I can tell you.
No, I'm not talking about this. Yes, I'm talking about the policy she talks about, like, okay, if you're going to create a mentorship program, you probably like a response to that nobody should create an environment. So let's say my initial response to my environment, now the mentorship talks about how to make sure that when the person the minister is here now, she wants to do it. The next minister might not want to do it. What happens then? How do we go again? We're making recommendations.
So maybe if we think and think about that.
So we have just about 6 minutes left, so begin to wrap up your thoughts and make sure that you identify somebody who will be debriefing the rest of the group on your behalf.
Let's go to our last question. What feedback mechanisms can be established to allow regular evaluation of impact policies? Feedback mechanisms can be established to allow regular evaluation of impact policies.
That would be a guideline that
there's more openness, there's more transparency by design.
We can include like communities, you know, so we were talking about right. So guidelines for media and then regular time, especially for areas that
I just want to get the guideline. Is it every event, every step, every whatever they do, in every across all departments
Sort of mechanisms to monitor the technology to ensure that the
What are these things? What are your guidelines? What's transparency about accountability at all? Once we do that, how we respond
They're working on
Policy to build in I'm seeing the point here to ensure transparency and accountability. I see the point that says ways and tracking process. We don't have one to replace the policy.
So we have just about a minute to round up. Make sure you've identified a speaker who would be brief on your behalf.
I mean, Ghana did it,
I will be giving. So I'm going to give additional 10 seconds for wrap up. Your countdown, please. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, all right, all right. May I please get everyone's attention? Work, studio, group 2 and 3. Mr. Olawale, Miss Neliaku. All right, so Ms. Uwanaka, since you guys finished first, I'm going to hand the mic over to you and your team for the debrief, just as soon as we're able to get everybody refocused here. Hello, hello, hello. One house, please. One house, please. Thank you all. Please give yourselves a round of applause for trying to solve the problem of young people in 50 minutes. Such a daunting task, but you did it. So I'm going to hand over the mic now to Work Studio Group 1 for their debrief.
Thank you so much. It was an exciting session. We had private sector, public sector. We had a representative of the minister here, so we're taking all the policy feedback to them directly. So, so we're going to hand over to our scribe and our, what is it, what do you call it? Yeah, anyways. So she's going to give us an overview of what we just discussed. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning once again. So for Work Study Group 1, my name is Bushra Balogun. For Work Study 1, we started with, excuse me, we started by looking at the policy circle. If you're trying to create a policy, there's a process to it, right? How do you even start? You start by looking at how policy is being formulated. You start by the agenda setting, where you get to accumulate the problems of the people, what's their pain point, what are the challenges. Then you move on to the policy formulation itself that considers some of these realities of the people, what the challenges are. Then you go to legitimization, then implementation, evaluation, of course looking at how the policy has been working, what's the impact, then policy maintenance, succession and termination. Is it working? What went well? What is not working? Do we have to revisit some things? Do we have to discard some things? Then the cycle goes again. Then next to our question, sorry, what's the first?
So the first question was, what specific criteria should be included in a youth impact assessment for new policies?
Thank you. First, we looked at data. Data is key. You know, I just finished from the School of Politics, Policy and Governance. Just last week I graduated. Yes, thank you. No, Dr. Obi always says something. In God we trust, every other person must bring data, because data is king and it speaks to a lot. So when you don't have data, it's sort of, whatever you're trying to do is skewed, right? So we look at the census, having a census data where you can do M&E, where it captures all the challenges, all the issues, and the requirements of the people, their needs, their peculiarities. And first, there was an example from one of the group members that talked about, sorry, let me quickly go there, and they talked about how data is being used in other countries, drawing from best practices of other countries. Talked about, is it Vagana think tank in Tanzania? They have a system whereby it captures all the demography, all the data of the demography. And for every event you have, every demography is being represented across different categories. So that way, everybody is actually in that room, their voices are heard, their needs are captured, and no one is left out. So that way, you already have a very inclusive system whereby everybody's needs are actually prioritized, and it also gives you robust data when you're trying to, for whatever policy you are trying to work on, or for whatever agenda you're setting. Then next, we look at young people, youth data bank. Of course, interestingly, we have good news for you. The Ministry of Youth in Nigeria, of course, the minister was here earlier, but she refused to give us this news, but at least I'm bringing it to you now. Yeah, she didn't want to reveal it to us, but at least we actually have the news now, and we're happy about it. Okay, yeah, so there's a youth data bank they're working on in the ministry, and it's going to capture everything youth in Nigeria, so we should all look out for that. Then next we looked at question 2, what we need to do in terms of inclusion, collaboration among youth programs, organization, that should be mandated. And there's also a program in the US that actually brings on young people as low as the age of 10 on the board of a program whereby they actually they're actually part of the admin, they can actually give grants, and also, they can give grants and they are well represented. So imagine we have that kind of program in Nigeria where we can catch them young and they can begin to participate. Okay, then there's also something about tax incentive. So let's say if every company is mandated to actually organize a program or probably have something that captures the SDGs, and for every SDG goal you are able to implement on, you get a tax incentive for it. So imagine, what? Yeah, and as long as it includes youth, you're capturing that youth demography. So imagine how much we're able to, how much impact we're able to generate if young people can be prioritized in such kind of programs. Then we also have mentorship, which is very, very key. A lot of young people don't even know where to start. They don't know where to go. I'm a product of Kashim Ibrahim Fellowship today because one governor decided to take that step to include young people. I didn't know anybody, and this brings me to transparency. I was just in my house. I applied to Kashim Ibrahim Fellowship. I got on the program. I was mentored and I was taught about governance. And today, he has spurred me to want to contribute to governance in Nigeria and see how I can also be part of fixing Nigeria, fixing politics, and fixing the problem. Thank you. Then we also looked at categorization of when you're looking at data, we need to categorize this data. How does it capture PWDs? How does it capture the problems of women? How does it capture minors and all? Then next we look at education policy. Education policy needs to be very, very inclusive. Then we also have to make it very robust to capture global practices. How is it capturing digital inclusion? How is it capturing maybe the needs of girl child? How is it capturing the well-being of people and mental health and the likes? Next, national orientation. This is very key. We need to create a value system for ourselves because we keep talking about accountability. If you do not have that value system, trust me, you will keep rigmaroling around the circle and we keep churning out leaders. Of course, they are not value-driven, and it means taking us back again to square one because we're not going to get results. Then lastly, civil service continuity. Please, one minister comes in, starts the program, the next person comes back and tell you, I don't want to do this. So what happens to the resources you put into this program? What happens to the time and the energy? Is all gone to waste. Then another person brings on a program and you don't see the impact and you're wondering why we're not making progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chinenye and your entire team. Well done, well done. I know it was ambitious to say 5 minutes, but I should say from now on, any group that runs beyond 5 minutes, you're going to pay us back in gallons of fuel. That's all we're taking. All right, Miss Chimdi, it's now time, your work studio 2.
We'll pay back in diamonds, don't worry. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Group 2, or Work Studio 2, and what we will be talking about is essentially how do we meaningfully engage young people in the design and implementation phases, both in the public and private sector. I'm not going to do the talking. I'm going to hand over to our able scribe, Mr. David Machuku. You have the floor.
Alrighty, I will make this quick because I cannot buy fuel for everybody. All right, so we were talking about models for youth engagement and participation. And the question we're tasked with, how can we effectively engage youth in both the design and implementation phases of public and private sector policies? And so to save time, we sort of like took all the questions just on a rolling basis. But the first one is, what are the most effective models for youth engagement in policy making that can be replicated or adapted? And across the board, we had, I think the one that stood out the most was the example you gave from Colombia. There's a layered approach to reaching effective participation and engagement. And basically, it's inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and then lead. So essentially, the basis for that is having some sort of chain, like a pipeline, to make sure that, okay, you're reaching and you're tapping into the skill sets of young Nigerians, of youth, because we're able to realize that, okay, there are these skills, but how can we institutionalize them? How can we make these systems official? How can we make sure that it's continuous? And then also the development of mentorship schemes, shadow initiatives at MDAs, even in the private sector, having young people sort of like shadow these leaders that are already in existence. But then even when we brought that up, there was a very strong point that was raised that we shouldn't leave out certain voices, because we get to spaces like this and there's a tendency to only have elitist voices represented. So basically the inclusion of youth voices from the last mile or hard to reach communities in learning, decision making, representation in key sectors or platforms, and even to follow with that, more strategic town halls in underrepresented communities. And then to answer the question on how can we establish and sustain youth councils, advisory boards, there was a point on experiential learning across institutions. So, it's a multi-pronged approach. There's schools, in the workforce, at the governance level. And then finally, so that I don't buy this fuel, what channels should be created or enhanced to ensure continuous and meaningful consultation? So yes, there was a point raised on more proactive policy making. So basically future-proofing the process. I think that's utilizing data. I don't know. Yeah, just making sure that there's a continuous flow of data at every single point. Expanding and strengthening our vocational education institutions, systems, and frameworks. I mean, most of us know that we have a pretty standard system. There's supposed to be the 633 approach, 6336. Yeah. But yeah, just having more vocational forms of education be much more respectable, and just having a separate chain of like workforce. I think that covers it, right? Yeah.
Well done, team. Miss Neliako, you're actually giving us about a minute back. That's good. I don't know. Now we owe you, Phil. Okay, so we get to the third work studio, and Mr. Olawale is going to lead this conversation now.
Thank you very much. Thanks for dashing us 1 minute. We'll use it judiciously. Our group was focused on monitoring and evaluation. How do we have indicators to look at this entire youth inclusive policy processes? And of course, we have someone who will lead that conversation and give you a summary of what we discussed. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rotimi. So, good morning once again. My name is Abdullahi Ibrahim. So, for Work Studio 3, just as our esteemed moderator had mentioned, the question was how can the active and sustainable implementation of these youth inclusive policies be across the public and private sectors be actualized? And so for the first question around key indicators that should be measured, that should be used to measure the inclusion policies, we had considerations for already existing study cases such as the Not Too Young to Wrong platform that should be part of this engagement, so because they have more experience in actually ensuring that this is done effectively. There was also consideration for number of people benefiting from the policies, number of young people in leadership positions across all levels. There was also conversation, a short banter around the age bracket as well, but it's a conversation that can overflow. But there was the need to consider whether or not the 15 is too early or 29 is too early as well or late. There's also consideration for marginalization in terms of people with disabilities, internally displaced persons, regionalization across urban, rural, and other more regions and hinterland fringes. There's also consideration for young people that have been part of these conversations, as others have mentioned, in ensuring that they're part of the policy design and not just when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. Let me be sure that my team will not fundraise. Then there's also consideration for youth and social inclusion desks to ensure harmonization of data that is available in all these ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as parastatals. So the next question was around how can we ensure transparency and accountability in the implementation of these policies. So there was a thought around database and tracking process to ensure that progress against targets are well harnessed and evaluated or assessed. There was also thoughts around ensuring effective sensitization around what accountability mechanisms exist. For young people anywhere, if you just touch any young person on the road and ask him, how can I hold the local government chairman of my region accountable, and he perhaps could tell you that, oh, there's the Freedom of Information Act, there's a desk for youth engagement and whatnot, so those are also relevant. There's also consideration for, please, how many minutes do I have? There's also consideration to ensure that we not only think about who can hold them accountable, but who is responsible in ensuring that they are held accountable. And then after checking whether they are accountable or not, what happens? Who will bell the cat, so to speak. And then there were considerations for measuring results, not just activities, outcomes, and impact potentially. So the last question was around feedback mechanisms that can be established to allow regular evaluation of the impact of these policies. So the first consideration was for a tri-sector approach to ensure that public, private, and development communities are engaged in the feedback process and the feedback loop, like these town halls, radio, low-tech, high-tech, mid-tech, so to speak. There's also consideration for inclusive feedback mechanisms that builds upon the first as well. And then the last was around the youth technical working groups that ensure harmonization of these data collection processes, case studies, and what is working, what is not working, so that it shapes what goes on moving forward. So, thanks.
Now, I am the one who should be saving up my money. Thank you, everyone, for really putting everything into this breakout sessions. It's evident that we took this seriously, and we did the work. And I know that while people were speaking, others perhaps in other groups you're probably itching to kind of like jump in. Things were popping out for you that you wanted to also share your thoughts on. We have the next 15 minutes now to do sort of a cross fertilization of ideas. So again, 3 work study groups, studios, 3 work studios. I don't know why that thing keeps coming up as study. Probably need to go back to school. So 3 work studios now. I open up the conversation for individuals who would like to contribute and chime in. And I'll be leaning on our very amiable scribe repertoire to help us to capture some of the ideas that will be also flowing from this cross-fertilization of ideas. Let's keep it to 30 seconds, maybe, to at the most a minute, so that we can get as many people as possible. Thank you. Mr. Lawale.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's a point I heard from this group talking about ensuring that these kinds of initiatives are not only focused on the elite youth. And I think that we had similar conversation on our table. And one of the things that we also mentioned around following the money, tracking the budget, is that we realized that almost 80 to 90% of the budget of the Ministry of Youth is dedicated towards the NYSC program, which then tells you that most of the money goes to the elite youth, graduates who are now ready to serve government. But what about the other young people, actually who are in the majority, who don't make it to the university or who don't graduate? So there's a big need for us to focus and ensure that our policies are actually inclusive, and that we dedicate more resources and time and initiatives to other young people who are not in this elitist category, like most of the people in this room. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just to even add to that, the double layer of that is that even when they come out of school, some of the programs that we design, the application processes. So for instance, now there might be grants or like maybe what are all these youth programs? You win youth fund, youth, all those things. So basically you've removed those people who are at the grassroots level. They will never be able to measure up. So most times, so right now you guys, I'm sure you've heard of the iDice fund now that's supposed to be for AFDB, focused on youth and all that stuff. Most times the requirements are going to people who went to the Ivy League schools, tech founders, all those things. So I think it's a real problem because majority of Nigerians, we're the 1%. We said that on this table as well. So I'm happy that it came up in all the 3 tables, and we're very open to solutions and ideas of how we can really practically, and last point is that our system of governance is very high-handed. So people revere our leaders and all that. How do we change the mindset of leaders to be able to roll up their sleeves and actually go to the grassroots and engage? Thank you.
Just one final thing. Also, the mode of application is now almost 99% virtual online. Yes. And we should remember that there's still about 30% of Nigerians who are not connected to the internet. Actually, there's a young person that was interacting with me once, asked a question, I responded, and then went off. When I asked him the next day, he said, I switched off my data because I want to preserve it till the end of the month. So we should recognize that there are young people, even when they have access, cannot afford it. So this penchant for only virtual online application is an elitist thing that we must ensure that we have a second lens to look at.
And even the network is no longer 30%. Most people don't even have that data anymore. Yesterday, I was talking to some people in my community, my village. They had to stand on the major road. They had to leave their houses. There are youth that were trying to make more digitally literate and giving them laptops. They don't have network. They don't have power. Zero. So how do we even support the infrastructure that would even help those people at the last mile?
Thank you. Very important conversations.
About taking it less virtual, the transport to get them to one place, just getting geographically, people moving from different states, security and everything. I think we should look more at getting our structure and infrastructure in place to get beamers so we can get network, and then make it cheaper for these people to be able to use it free in most other countries, to be able to do that for them.
Which is why I'm so glad we have some private sector, big wigs in the room, so that you can also begin to hear ideas of what are some of the ways, if we're going to invest or partner with government to improve the lot of young people, in what ways can that partnership make big wins? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So I think one very critical area that there's a lot of gap in is around vocational skills, and so you would notice that is it marginalization against people who graduated from polytechnics. So if you didn't go to university, the process to even do NYC is a totally different thing. If you have a diploma, it's not considered as enough education. And the polytechnics I'm sure the initiative behind that was to ensure that while you are also building the doctors, you're also building people who would, invest in the construction industry in different sectors. So it kind of also solves the unemployment problem, but you're not investing enough in the informal workspace. So that also bridges the gap. So everybody goes to school, comes back, and then they're looking for white-collar jobs, or they feel that some skills are not elite enough for them to do. But if we invest in value reorientation to ensure that people see that these are also avenues to make impact. Imagine that you have a fund to train tilers better, or send them to Europe to go and learn, to be better tilers. That is something that would solve part of our unemployment problem. But then it's now for the very uneducated, because there's no enough investment in those areas. So how can we also leverage on all of the avenues we have to impact on young people?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This has been interesting so far. My name is Chinwe Efyong. I'm CEO of an organization that focuses on scaling impact through appropriate technology. I have a very simple question tied to Group 1. You talked about values-driven data collection and analysis, which connects to a conversation we had on my group about accountability. How do we avoid romanticizing youth and ensuring that the young people that are representing are young people who are also holding themselves accountable as we are holding policymakers accountable? Accountability is reciprocal. So are we including those mechanisms in the approach?
A question to reflect on. But I'm going to pass the mic. Yes, and then you had also your hand up.
No, thank you. Abdurrahman Mijinyo with Shell. I think you made a really good point, and I was hoping it would come through in terms of vocation. And this is not a sales speech by any stretch of the imagination, but some things we try to do is we've got, for example, a few what we call centers of excellence in certain universities that align with our core capabilities. So going in to get undergraduates, but also postgraduate folks that work with our professionals, so it builds capacity. Some of them come to work for us, some go to work for somebody else. So that's something that we do. But, sorry? Yes. But I think outside of Shell, there's something I would like us all to think about. And she talked about vocation. And I'm sure most of us have a lot of experience with this. But I had the opportunity to live in the Netherlands for some time. And of course, at some point, my kid was getting ready to go to school. And the policy in the Netherlands is, only 10% of the population goes to university. That's how they design the policy. So the vast majority actually don't go. They don't need to, but they are trained and equipped to live a good life anyway. I remember one time I had a challenge with my gas cooker, and the repairman that came, if you saw his kit, he had a full kit, everything that needed to be done. If you look at, if you take the example of the Nigerian real estate sector over the past 2 decades, I don't have data, so I'm speculating, but hopefully I won't be too far off. If I said we probably spend $10–20 billion, maybe more, in just real estate across Nigeria, assuming over those 2 decades, we had a policy that required just 10% of that 20 billion, not 90%. Just 10% to be spent in Nigeria. Imagine the impact it will have in the capability. So just something for us to think about.
But you went ahead and really, really insight. I'm glad I'm seeing hands up here. Just to the point he just made, you know, I lived in the US for 7 years, and I know one time I had the misfortune of needing a plumber to come by, you know, to do some work. I think the plumber bill was maybe $100 to $120 an hour, right? That's how much I played. I don't even know what, but they didn't spend an hour, but that's the minimum. You come there between 0 and 1 hour, that's how much you can expect to pay, and that's a plumber. And they get the job done. Good point.
All right, thank you. My name is Yusuf Liad Abiodun. I work with iLead Africa. I want to lay more emphasis on the monitoring and evaluation and sustainability of youth initiative and policy. I believe we have enough policy for youth, especially the National Youth Policy. And there are some platforms for young people like Nigerian Youth Council and Nigerian Youth Parliament and other initiatives. And what I think we lack is the proper monitoring and evaluation of those initiatives. And I'm glad that we're having the representative of the Federal Ministry of Youth. I think they need to do a lot of work in ensuring that they assess the effectiveness of those initiatives. It's not necessary that we are coming up with another initiative, but how well can we do with the existing one? Is it impactful? Are we really getting are reaching the target audience, and are we driving our objective of those initiatives? And the first studio group, they mentioned about the challenges we are facing related to the political changing system. You know, when we have a changing of political system, they tend to change the policy or the initial initiative that we have on ground. And this is lack of the sustainability plan. I think we need to put as important aspect when we are coming up with either the new initiative or the existing one, looking at the sustainability plan. When we have the sustainability plan in place, it will be difficult for any government to just come in and change it. And lastly, it is time we begin to look at the co-ownership of any program or policy coming from the government. As civil society, you know, there's something we call need assessment. When you want to come up with a project, you go to the community, you talk to them, you ask them a various of questions that will allow you to critically understand their need, and you know, it will also guide them and give them the confidence to be part of the planning and own the initiative. But this is lacking on the government side. You will just see the flyer maybe about a particular program. Do you make a consultation? Do you inform the young people? How do you want to sustain it? So it's important, the monitoring and evaluation and sustainability of any project coming from the government. Thank you.
About 4 minutes to round up, and there were a lot of people that raised their hands, so I'm now going to assign numbers, right? So we're going to take him, we're going to come back. Okay, so we're going to take Chimdi, we'll take him, we'll come back to the table, her, and then the last will be Blossom, and then you.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention something I think cuts across the 3 different studios, which is around how we actually engage with young people, whether it's in policy, whether it's in M&E, or just meaningful engagement. One thing I've realized is that there's a difference between do you have anything to say and asking, does anyone have anything to say? So when we come to rooms like this, in fact, something I would have liked to do is actually ask some specific people who have not said anything. You know, do you particularly, especially you, Abigail, do you have something to say? Because when I carry out this experiment, when I have maybe junior colleagues in the office and we go out, I'll always ask, do you have anything to say? And more often than not, they will always have something meaningful to contribute to the conversation. But if you just asked, does anyone have anything to say? Many times people wouldn't put their hands up. So that's something I wanted to talk about. But also, it leads to a bigger question for government, which is around public relations. And that's one area that I see that there's a lot of, there's a huge gap. And I always say it's the responsibility of government to communicate to people, not to say we put out the information, not to say we're doing all this, we're doing all that, but to actually ensure that young people know what is going on and can contribute meaningfully. Even if you just say, oh, if you have something to say, write to us, that's not enough. You have to actually go out there and engage properly. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Number 2, and then yes.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Shamsuddin Abdurazak. I lead the team at Glowing Minds Initiative. I actually wanted to draw attention to something that's actually very important. We have some statutory youth groups period to this time, and Yusuf has actually aligned to some of them. But there's one other one that we've actually not been looking at, and it's also very crucial, and that's the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS. That particular organization has actually been too politicized, and the electioneering period that leads to who emerges in that particular thing is actually a tug of war. And yeah, so it's so looking at that, according to the data we have from NYSC, so it shows that close to about 400,000 young people pass through the scheme, between 400,000 to 500 pass through the scheme annually. So that tells us that the association that actually breeds those young people to bring them into the society and oversee what happens is the NANS. So we have the NANS, we have the zonal structure, we have the JCC, and those people, majority of them sometimes, some of them 10 years, 20 years ago, they've actually left the shores of the university, but it controls the affairs of what happens in our universities. And we have young people between the ages of possibly 18 and above going through those processes, and these are the people who actually champion the affairs of such organization. So I had actually had an experience being a former student union leader through that process, but then with some of the experience we've had, it's actually not something we felt, okay, should continue. So while we're on campus, we've been advocates of the leadership of the studentship should go back to the campus. But unfortunately, up until this moment, we still have people who they call the Toronto comrades. And so we have, so that particular aspect, and I know one critical sector, or when you want to know the weight of such organization, is when it comes to the electioneering period. These are the same organizations that the Nigerian government or political class engage to actually mobilize young people to come and actually use them for political rallies. And so if we're talking about that particular segment, the youth demography, we shouldn't also forget that particular aspect, especially when we're talking about inclusion for young people. So over time, I've actually been concerned of how best to actually engage that particular this. But it actually seems like it's a cabal system that it's very actually hard to demystify. So I just wanted to put it out there for us to actually think about it and see how we can actually go.
Thank you. Very important point you've raised. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So my name is Toyin Adegbitemo, and I'm a consultant with Shafam and Tam Limited. Two points that I wanted to say that, again, cuts across all the conversation. One is the importance of leadership, and two, the importance of political will, especially from the government perspective. If we don't have political will to engage our young people, it's not going to happen. So, and when we're talking about the elite versus the non-elite, when my sister here was talking about vocational training, there's a young man that's doing, please everyone check it out, it's called I Create Africa. And they're really promoting vocational training to a level of competition, you know, helping people to, not only do they compete and people win money and prize money, you know, $10,000, they're able to increase money every year, but they're really training people how to hone in on those skills so that they can start, you know, putting value to their skill. So you don't have to have formal education in order to be successful, as we all know. You mentioned Netherlands. Those, you know, there are places around the world where the labor that people do, you know, labor is cheap in Africa, and especially in Nigeria. And we need to figure out how to engage the people that don't speak English very well, don't have the right diction, all of that stuff, but still are very, very smart, articulate people, they know their stuff. How do we engage them? Because they feel marginalized. I actually asked a few of them before coming to Abuja, I said, I'm going to Abuja, what do you want me to say? And there's freedom without freedom. You know, and I said, what do you mean freedom without freedom? He said, yeah, there's freedom of speech, but after you speak, there's no more freedom. You know, so those sort of things, we need to start changing mindset of you know, of our leaders in terms of engaging our young people and really truly bringing them to the table so that they can speak their mind and not have to suffer the consequences. You know, there's a lot of memes going around in terms of, you know, the hardship in Nigeria. And you know, a guy started off speaking English and he said, yeah, I'm not speaking English anymore. Pressure tikpo, pressure po, you know. And that's really, I mean, and I think it's so important that we all understand that we are all going through. Even some of us that feel that you've arrived, if we start complaining, how much more the man on the street, the woman on the street. So we just need to all come together, drop our logos and egos, and really work together on behalf of our young people, because they're our future, and we need to do this. So that's mine.
We're doing well. We're doing well. Not last. No. You're the last, but like 3 more people.
So I'll be very brief.
Very brief. So
Thank you.
And then
Yes.
Blossom, and then we wrap up with her.
So I just want to suggest some solutions for us. We have Industrial Training Fund. It exists. It's still there, but they're struggling. We need to give them due attention. The other one is we need to professionalize our trade groups and associations. We have trade groups and associations. If they're professionalized, there's training and there's democracy. Whenever we have intervention funds, it's easy to find people. And even the financial institutions, when people belong to clusters, the clusters can hold them accountable. That's level 1 KYC. The other one is to get our schools from secondary school and above to connect to ITF for technical and vocational skills training. Because some of the admission cycles from the universities, there are gap years. And those years can be used more profitably by people who are in school. Let's make it look, like my children say, make it hot, make it look sexy, right? So that people think it's fashionable to do that. Then the last one is allow students at university level to have work hours. You know, when there was this debate about the salaries, I said if we had a situation whereby income levels in Nigeria is like what is done abroad, it's by hour, then we can have more productivity and you can earn as you can work. And when you're a student in school, during the school term, you can have up to 20 hours of work, you build work skills. When you're on holidays, you can have 40 hours. So the organization should be able to take on people on per hour basis, and that will be very engaging for our students. And that will also address the issue of engagement, because even before they graduate, they understand the protocol of work life. Thank you very much.
Blossom, do you have a mic?
All right, thank you very much. Hi, good morning, everyone. I think one thing that cuts across, sorry, my name is Blossom. I'm with NMPC. This is a good time to tap into what he said. It was a joint venture thing now, boss. It wasn't just shell. It's not just a shell thing, it's a joint venture. You know what I mean? All right. So I think something that actually affects all the tables here should be looking at population. So when we look at the youth demography, that's where we have the highest population. But one thing we usually would do is when we have maybe budget or funding challenges, the first thing we try to do is to prioritize, and then in the prioritizing, we just take it aside and then forget about it. And that ties into what you had mentioned about the NYSC. My mom went to a college of education before she then went further to get her bachelor's degree. After her college of education, she went for NYSC. That was several years ago, before I was born though. So, but what that tells you is certain policies follow the nuances of the day. So at that point, maybe the population, they were really few, so they can absorb as many people as they can into the program. But over the years, the population grew, and then they cannot sort of
assimilate everyone. So they had to start deprioritizing, and then along the line, they forgot about those people. So that might just answer that question. But what do I think is the way forward? You talked about plumbers and HVAC. I was reading an article over the weekend, and it said America's crop of new millionaires and billionaires are now HVAC and plumbers. So what we can do, that tells you can, leave this room, intellectual conversation, and go become a plumber. So what that tells you, what that then tells you is we have to start finding ways of, sort of mainstreaming these other adjacent career trajectories and paths, and see how we can put in a lot more excellence in it. The real estate you talked about, I can assure you that if I need excellence from, artisans in Nigeria, I might not easily think of using Nigerians as those artisans. That's the truth. I'll probably prefer to go to a Benin Republic and get a better quality of work at a cheaper cost and at a saner mindset. I'm not going to have high blood pressure. So those are things we need to start deliberately looking. And then finally, of course, I have to sell my organization. We have this new policy on the table for our young professionals. I'm sure there are people that had also applied to come join us. We're waiting for you. So you want to attend a conference, you want to do, for anything you want to do that would require some form of learning or something, if you don't have a young professional in that memo, it's not going to get a yes. So that's a deliberate attempt to make sure that the young persons, I'm no more young, I'm in my 40s, that young people are not just, so it's a deliberate attempt to ensure that young people, they are not a disabled group. You had mentioned that. It's not an afterthought. It's a deliberate, continual, intentional attempt to make sure that they are held, that they are put at the pedestal at every point in time. So that's the one good practice we've been doing, and it's a practice I would also encourage us to take home to in our various organizations and endeavors. Thank you.
All right. Our wrapping us up in the contributions.
It's also a good singer, by the way, everyone.
Oh,
Me? You can see the surprise. Oh, in the bathroom. No, I sing very well in the bathroom. In the shower, we all great singers.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Gift, and I just wanted to say that we've had like a really great time just sharing and cross-sharing ideas. My final contribution will be that I feel like one of the things that's cut across the 3 work studios was how it'd be great if we actually have like a framework that can be applied in both private sector and public sector. And I think I like what this work studio 2 said about inform, engage, so like a framework that cuts across the different phases of how do you actually put up a policy together. And I guess what I was going to close up with saying is, as we all go back, our hope is, when we're designing this session, our hope is that the next phase of engagement would be to actually stress test existing policies and see how youth inclusive it is. And when we do reach out to anybody in this room for further engagement, we hope that you would accept our call and engage with us. But as we go home in our own separate works, let's see how can we adapt or adopt some of the things we're saying. So in your organization, be it civil society, private or government, keep on asking yourself those questions. How can we make this particular policy or law that we're trying to bring into our organization, how can we make it more youth inclusive? When we all started this conversation about gender inclusive policies, it took a while before organizations started asking, how do we include more women and all of that stuff. So let's also go with that same energy and keep up asking ourselves that question, how do we engage more youth in whatever things that we're doing? Thank you.
Whoa, can we please, yes, a round of applause for everybody who's been a part of this conversation, who's contributed to the discussions. Really, really energetic group of people, committed, passionate. I can tell that we all want this to work. What I'm hearing from this room today is that representation matters. What I'm hearing from this room today is that there is no policy for us, for young people, without young people. I don't consider myself young people.
And the key principle of democracy is inclusion, right? Government of the people, by the people, for the people. And earlier we stated that the largest demography in this country are young people. So what kind of government are we creating of who, by who, for whom, when we don't have the largest demography at the table? So we're on the same page about prioritizing youth participation. Not just youth participation, but also ensuring that at every state, local, state, national, across MDAs, as you're designing and implementing policies, you're doing it with a focus. You're wearing your youth lens as you're designing those policies. And what I heard from this room as well is that there is interest. Young people they're interested in being a part of this. In 2018, President Buhari signed a Not Too Young to Run into law. Subsequent election, 43% of the young people that ran in that election were beneficiaries, direct beneficiaries of Not Too Young to Run. So in the previous election, they would not have been eligible to run. And just by reducing the age qualification by 5 across board, we had 43% more people who indicated interest. So young people are interested. We've talked about, one thing else I heard over the course of the conversation is that we can't, everybody, every one of us sitting here, we're elite young people. We already have, we're elite individuals. We have our secondary school degrees. Most of us probably have not just bachelors, but maybe masters, maybe PhDs in the room, right? But majority of young people do not even reside in the urban areas. They're in the rural areas. So who's designing for them, right? So I also heard that vocational skills are important. This is one way of bringing in some of those underrepresented youths. Our universities, we know, there are over 200 of them, but they cannot even accommodate the individuals that graduate secondary school every year. We can't even take them all in. So what alternative educational platforms are we not just creating, but actively supporting to ensure that they can cater for the other group of people who may not be interested in a formal university education? And we've heard that vocational skills is sexy. It's financially viable, right? It sustains economies outside of here. How can we make that also relevant for our folks here? And we've shared some of the ideas of how we can make that happen. Work study. One of the things we heard during the Not Too Young to Run is, well, why are young people, why are they interested in running? Where are they? They have what ideas are they going to have? No experience. You hear that all the time, whether it's in, political participation, whether it's young people leading, in private sector, they have no experience. Well, how are they going to have experience if there's no intentional effort for them to build that experience? So what I heard as I moved around the group today was there's a need to start early to groom. So someone mentioned work-study hours in universities. That's a great way to gain work experience that you can leverage when you graduate, so that you don't finish university and you have a blank CV, right? As an employer, you want to hire somebody who can bring something to the table. So let's start early. Somebody mentioned NANS. NANS, if you look at majority of young people who run for office, a lot of them are individuals who have either served as SUG executives in undergraduate or been members of NANS. So they start to get their training through those platforms, which is the reason why we have to make sure that we're intentional about the kinds of experience that they're gaining from those platforms. So a lot of great ideas have been shared here, but I think the one that I think is most valuable, right, because it's something that we can do, it's within our own area of influence, is what the last speaker said is, for all of what we've heard, let's walk away from this room with the consideration that it begins with me, right? I hope that all of what we've heard, because even as I sat here and listened, my mind, I was taking a lot of notes, because when I go back to the office, I know that I'm going to be thinking differently about some of the things that I'm doing, and I hope that we all do that as well. Because when we start in our own small spaces and influence the people in our own little corners, that's really how this change begins to take root. So again, I want to thank
the organizers of this event, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, the Abuja Global Shapers, and may I invite David as well to come and just say a few words. He leads an organization of young people who are doing phenomenal things. I think they deserve to talk a bit about what they're doing. In case you know people who are interested in building, starting early to build their own professional development to be able to take on those big positions in the future. 2 announcements before I hand over to David. One is, I was told that you have a QR code on your badge. So if there's somebody you've met here and you're like, oh my goodness, I want to stay in touch, and I hope that's everybody, please scan. You don't need to, do the old-fashioned of, give me your phone number, give me your card. No, save your card, save it for the climate, and just scan the QR code. That should automatically, I haven't tried it, but I was told that this should automatically, get you the contact.
When you scan, it should say save call card.
Yes.
And then you save the person's contact.
Such a great idea. This is low-hanging fruit. Amazing. Then the second thing, I understand that there's a paper that will be passing around at some point. We really want to get the names of the individuals who were in this room, because by the time we want to be able to stay in touch. This was such a great group of individuals with a great wealth of experience. We want to be able to reach back out to you again as the ideas on this that were formed here, sort of begin to take shape. I know these ideas are going to be put together into a thing that will be shared with ministries. We want to stay in touch and keep reaching out to you. On that note, I really want to thank you all for, again, the privilege and honor to be able to facilitate this conversation, and thank you all again for, putting your all into being a part of this. And now I hand over to the curator of the Abuja Hub of the Global Shapers Community, David.
Thank you very, very much, Bella, and thank you to everyone who joined us this morning. It really has been an insightful session. But just a tidbit about what we do, so again, so that the field thing doesn't jump back on me. The Abuja Global Shapers Community, the Abuja Hub, anyways, we're part of a wider network, and we are the youngest body of the World Economic Forum. Back in 2011, WEF decided to establish this body as a way of sort of having youth voice, basically what we're doing now, and having youth voices being brought to the forefront. Many of us remember the Arab Spring, the uprisings at the start of the 2010s, and this was sort of a solution to that. Currently, we have about 17 hubs across Nigeria. We're here in the center of unity, and across board, we're always making sure how can we participate, use our geographical location to participate in inclusive policy making, dialogue, just strengthening those systems. And I'm very glad and very thankful to the NESG for having us. And yeah, if you know any young people between the ages of 18 to 27, because the ages were reduced recently, interestingly, because they believe that more younger people should have a voice. It's no longer 21 to 33, it's now 18 to 27. So if you know people within that age range, this is a perfect opportunity for them to learn, to be a part of the forum, because they become members of the WEF. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And last comment before I, invite us. I'm so happy that everybody's still here. You know what this feels like to have a conversation. Everybody's so engaged. They stay. Thank you. I know I've said it before, but genuinely thank you. I understand that there's a representative from the Minister of State for Youth. I want to say a warm welcome. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And with that, thank you. With that, I would, say thank you and wish us until next time. Sanu.